Hi there, and thank you for joining us on another episode of The Nation. Joining me in the studio today is Mr. RONI SHAH MUSTAPHA, as well as Ms. SHAFINAZ SALIM, both from Cyberview, Sindrian Berhad, talking about investment opportunities and incentives in Cyberjaya. Welcome to the show. How are you guys doing?
Hi, great, Sonia. Thank you.
Great. Now, we've seen many businesses pivoting their strategies to meet the changing consumer demands ever since society moved towards the endemic. Perhaps you can share some of your thoughts on the changes you have observed in businesses landscape since the pandemic, Mr. RONI.
Yes, thank you, Sonia. Yeah, so the pandemic, what we've seen really affected several businesses across the industry. But what we've seen more greatly is those businesses who were not inherently digital, who are not technology companies. They are greatly more affected than the technology ones. So what this means, what that translates, is that businesses with this pandemic or with this endemic needs to adapt in terms of looking at how they can innovate further, and as well as focus more on research and development. So 98.5% of Malaysian businesses are SMEs. So I think here we are in Cyberview, we look at how we can really support and assist these SMEs in terms of how they can innovate and how they can further focus in terms of putting resources in research and development. So I think that's in a nutshell, I think that's how we see the businesses are affected within this pandemic, Sonia.
Yeah, definitely. It's important to embrace technology and also adapt. But of course, with those changes, there comes many challenges. What are some of the challenges do you think that are frequently faced by businesses, especially in their digital transformation journey, in your observation, SHAFINAZ?
Okay. Well, first and foremost, if you to reflect, particularly in Cyberjaya, most of the businesses here are largely startups and also the SMEs. And when you talk about these category of companies, the challenges, especially during this pandemic, they look at both strategy and also the technical side of it. And among the common ones will be the challenge in terms of the lack of support that they need, and also the funding and the needed skill sets in order for them, like what we mentioned by RONI earlier, that they need to stay innovate. So that means that they need to pivot quickly and look at what will be the areas where they can be able to survive and stay differentiated. And currently, they're looking at the depleting of the marketing funds, slower customer acquisition, even changes in adapting to the current working environment or the business environment that they need to adapt with.
Definitely, and I couldn't agree more with you on that. And of course, I noticed various incentives are being offered and made available to businesses during these times. Perhaps you can elaborate more on that. I heard that's the Cyberview rent relief, as well as business and investment incentives. Ms. SHAFINAZ, perhaps you can elaborate more on that, please.
Okay, for us here in Cyberview, we are very much believe in collaborating with others. So in terms of the incentives, one by primarily forge the collaboration with the investment promotion agencies like the Malaysian Investment Development Authority, MIDA. That agency itself, has abundance of incentives already available made for businesses here in Malaysia. The likes of the tax exemptions, talking about the pioneer status investment tax allowance, that sort of thing. But for us here in Cyberview itself, we also provided our own Cyberview incentive that comes in the form of a rent relief incentive. In fact, when we introduced this during the pandemic attack, it has benefited more than 95 over companies, in terms of this rent moratorium and also the discounts that we extend this to the companies that reside in some of the buildings here in Cyberjaya. On top of that, we're also looking at providing the other incentives, like where in terms of their recruitment, job placements, whereby they can hire internship, whereby some of these costs is actually being subsidized by Cyberview.
Interesting to note. And now, let's perhaps zoom into some of the businesses as well as investment incentives that are being offered by Cyberview. What are some of the incentives, particularly fiscal incentives, that Cyberview can provide to these companies who are keen to actually set up their businesses in Cyberjaya?
Right. Earlier on, in terms of part of the challenges, as I mentioned, the factor of the funding areas, right? And through the incentives, funding incentives, kind of important for these kind of businesses to continue to survive and operate. And these incentives, even through our partnership with MIDA, they have this Domestic Investment Strategic Fund, or DISF, and also the Smart Automation Grant that definitely very helpful for them to part of the digitalization and also as far as the working or business environment change towards digitalization itself during this restricted environment. And although the border have been closed and partially starting to open, but for those foreign investors, there's this incentive under what they call it the representative office or regional office, whereby the foreign investors can start exploring when they want to set up for their market exploration purpose. They can have part of their managerial also technical posts having to establish their presence before they put in more investment into the country. And another one that incentive that we introduced by Cyberview would be the Cyberview incentives through our soft lending package. This is the one that we introduced slightly right after the pandemic, whereby for companies in exploring the market again here in this country and also particularly in Cyberjaya, we provide a rent-free co-working spaces. They can have like a hot desking environment without having to invest in a big setup of their business operations while they try to explore. And we also provide an affordable rental spaces. On top of that, having access to our Cyberview Living Lab programs. And this would definitely help in terms for them to get network and access to some of the key contacts, like the, what are the government ministries or agencies or corporate organizations, in order for them to forge that partnership and have a more informed decision before they set up their business operations here in Cyberjaya and also in this country or even in this region.
Great. Well, thank you so much, SHAFINAZ, for sharing with us on the various incentives that are being provided by Cyberview. Perhaps we're going to take a quick break. Of course, when we come back, we'll be hearing more about investment opportunities in Cyberjaya. Don't go anywhere. Great. Now, welcome back to The Nation, and thank you for staying with us. Joining us in the studio is Cyberview Sudran Berhad. Now, earlier we were talking about some of the various incentives that are being offered by Cyberview to businesses. Perhaps you can expand further on some of the elements that fall under the hard infrastructure, and what are some of Cyberjaya's unique selling point propositions, RONI?
Right. Great. Thank you, Sonia. So Cyberjaya started around 24 years ago. So at its inception, the design for Cyberjaya has always been to focus on, well, at that time was ICT, but inherently what it is, it's for technology companies to thrive with innovation. So from a design standpoint, from a strategic design standpoint, it was designed with robust infrastructure in place. That means we've got redundancies in terms of utilities, in terms of the power utilities, as well as internet connectivity. We've got very good dark fiber connectivities into Cyberjaya, landing in various point of presence that connects throughout the whole world. Now, what we've seen from that is that 90% of co-located data centers are located in Malaysia, are located in Cyberjaya, which is testimony to the strength of the infrastructure here, as well as security here in Cyberjaya. Apart from the infrastructure that we have, what we have unique to Cyberjaya is this land classification in Cyberjaya, where we have an enterprise land classification. So what that means, what that translates into is that businesses can actually develop infrastructure, buildings, office buildings or property at a very cheaper rate compared to other locations. So a cheaper development will translate into cheaper rental facilities and cheaper ownership for technology companies. And what we've seen is throughout these 24 over years is a very healthy growth of this technology ecosystem here in Cyberjaya. We have on top of that, we have around 7 colleges and universities in Cyberjaya, and this provides a very good funnel for the talent for companies to hire in Cyberjaya. So Cyberjaya itself is a very good talent hub for companies to hire. It's also very close to several other universities and colleges all around the Klang Valley. So sourcing of talent is always an issue for technology companies. So with what we have in this ecosystem, it really helps contribute to the companies, especially technology companies, to grow. Another thing that we have is our unique location, which is right smack in the middle between KLIA and Kuala Lumpur City Centre, right? As well as our proximity right next to Putrajaya, our nation's capital. So a lot of agencies and ministries are located in Cyberjaya or the vicinity very close to Cyberjaya. So this also creates that ease of doing business, especially within technology companies, whenever they have to deal with their regulators and with the policymakers to get things done. And key to that as well, we have our subsidiary, Futurize. Now, Futurize has been mandated by the government to spearhead the National Regulatory Sandbox. So what that means, Futurize works very closely with the industry to help facilitate any regulatory matters or policy matters that the industry requires. So it facilitates in terms of it tries to assist the industry if there are any issues with regards to regulatory matters that Futurize can look to assist to resolve with the agencies, with the regulators, with the regulators. So I think this creates a whole ecosystem for technology companies to adapt, to grow, to thrive in. Sonia.
Definitely, I think with all those elements that you mentioned, Cyberjaya is definitely on track in becoming one of the hotbed for innovation. Now, moving back to our questions earlier, Ms. Shafinaz, we're talking about businesses having to adapt as well as embrace technology. What do you think are some of the focus business leaders should be embarking on to ensure that your innovation strategy or journey is progressive?
Okay, coming back to my earlier point, looking at the strategic planning, for what these businesses should look at, the areas where they should focus more is at the areas of where they needed most to improve. And the improvement can be done and can start with in a smaller scale. And with that, they can do that to have it market viability, and before they can decide whether to grow that new improvement areas or what we call scaling up into a bigger business operations. And with that, it also take the opportunity for these businesses to scan where are the new market opportunities and what kind of support that's made available out there, whether by the private sectors or even the government incentives that can help to support their new business areas.
Great, and also earlier, Mr. RONI actually elaborated on some of the hard incentives, right? Perhaps you can also elaborate on what are some of the soft side or soft infrastructures that are being provided at Cyberview.
From our side, on the ecosystem builder, the role that we are taking up on the soft side would be through our signature Cyberview Learning Lab programs. It covers the 4 quadrants, essentially, talent, that covers from the university or the academia side of it. The universities encompassing of those academic research, where we would like to encourage more of a collaboration between the academia and the industry for some of the technical research that's been made available from the university side itself, and they can test whether it's an industry driven kind of a research that can be helpful to the businesses. Then we have the accelerator segment. This is where useful for the startup segment. And our Cyberview Live Lab Accelerator itself, through our 6 months program, it helps the startups to actually validate and also expand further their business plan. And while at the end of the 6 months, they're able to demonstrate and attract more of the angel investors or the venture capital firms to further fund in terms of the funding systems that they require. Then you have the pilot, as mentioned by RONI. We have our subsidiary Futurize that look into the National Regulatory Sandbox. But there is also the other elements of when companies would like to test their new products or new prototype. You want to make use of Cyberjaya as the real living lab environment, real testing, not in the confined space of a lab, having to newly innovate. So that pilot is a signature for us here in Cyberjaya. And then we provide the market access. This is where is another important element, whereby the network with the corporates, with the government agencies, with the financial institutions are very important for these companies. They're needed as part of the ecosystem is concerned, and in order for them to grow further their business.
Definitely. And you mentioned some of the programs such as the Accelerator program. And I've heard that, it has successfully nurtured 85 startups and raised over 158 million in total investment. So kudos to your team. And some of the notable examples, perhaps you can just elaborate a little bit before we go on commercial break.
Okay. We have recently, in fact, it was just last week where we've got the 16th cohort graduated. We have, the program itself has raised more than 158 million investments, and also these startups are creating jobs. So among those startups that can be mentioned, like Govical, when they first started, it was known as Jom Parke. Essentially, they're looking into parking management system and having it as cashless, and they make use of facilities here in Cyberjaya for their parking solutions before they are then expanded their market or their solutions out there into KL and also even in other states like Kelantan. We have also other companies like Movebe, they're into the ride sharing or peer-to-peer transportation platform. Quite a number of the other startups that are into robotics as well, that also have made their mark in penetrating to the industry to automate their business operations. So,
great. Well, thank you so much for sharing some of the success stories from the program. Unfortunately, we're going to have to take another quick break. When we come back, we'll be hearing more about investment opportunities at Cyberjaya. Don't go anywhere. Well, thank you for staying with us on The Nation. Now, earlier we were discussing on some of the incentives that are being offered by Cyberview to businesses out there. Now we're moving on to Ms. SHAFINAZ. Perhaps you can tell us more about investor relations in Cyberjaya. What are some of the offerings that they can look forward to?
Okay, here in Cyberjaya, collaborations and partnerships are definitely the core of our ecosystem. Even when right at the time when the pandemic hit in March last year, we just 3 days prior, we actually launched our Cyberjaya Investment and Services Center that became the one-stop service center for the businesses, investors, and the community to inquire in many aspects. In a nutshell, for our Cyberjaya Investment and Services Center covers the services like business facilitation, should they have inquiries on how to set up the companies, the market ecosystem services, expatriate services, talent requirements. We cover also the business location on the office space, land matters, and also for the community, we have the city services and also the cyber city manager role on the township here in Cyberjaya. And this Cyberjaya Investment Services Center encourage our partnership and collaboration across government ministries, agencies, as well as the industry chambers of commerce, in international embassies as well, the likes of the British High Commission or even the Eurochem and many more. And through this kind of partnerships is actually enable us to provide that relationship and also services that may be required by these investors or the businesses to be connected, and also their needed assistance in terms of their making further businesses expansion here in this country. So for us, Cyberview, again, as I mentioned in the earlier part of our soft landing zone, that helped a lot for the initial setup. And I think another one that we also just introduced this year itself will be our collaboration campus. This actually helps to iterate our revitalizing Cyberjaya master plan with the 3 technology clusters focus, whereby we're looking at the existing ground, and also some of the companies that already have in Cyberjaya, for them to collaborate among one another and make use of the facilities, and what else will be needed by them that they can, strengthen their business ties. And this is where Cyberview will extend the role to see these companies actually grow together right here from Cyberjaya.
Great, definitely. I think this offer opportunities to actually converge with like-minded innovation community. Now, moving towards revitalizing Cyberjaya, as we know, and as you rightly elaborated and described earlier, Mr. Ronnie, it's on its way to becoming a vibrant and exciting global tech hub for the country. How do you think Cyberjaya can further support our local players to actually grow and expand their business? And what is that something that they can look forward to?
Great. Thank you, Sonia. So like SHAFINAZ mentioned, we introduced our new Revitalizing Cyberjaya Master Plan in 2020. So like I mentioned earlier, we've had 24 years of growth for Cyberjaya. So what we did was for us to think, what's next? What's the next 25 years? What are we supposed to do? So that's where this new Revitalizing Cyberjaya Master Plan came about. So within this new master plan, what we did is we looked at the city. The city itself, the Cyberjaya city itself, is just under 7,000 acres, 6,960 acres. And we divided the city into 4 different zones. And each zone has its distinct characteristic, but yet the synergies between all these zones. For example, north zone of Cyberjaya, we will have 2 MRT stations coming into. So this zone will be developed into a transit-oriented development. So this is where we look at to be the global business district for technology companies. Then we have downtown Cyberjaya. Downtown Cyberjaya is our existing thriving commercial center of Cyberjaya. And this is where the commercialization of technology products and solutions will happen. Then we have West Cyberjaya. West Cyberjaya is the concentration of where a lot of community-centric development will be. We have a lot of residential as well as universities located in West Cyberjaya. And key to this new master plan would be Southern Cyberjaya. Now, southern zone of Cyberjaya, we have around 400 over acres of undeveloped land yet to be further developed. And our focus here, like SHAFINAZ mentioned just now, is to develop into three distinct technology clusters, and they are smart mobility, smart healthcare, and digital creative. Now, we at Cyberview, what we look at is we try to develop the infrastructure as well as the ecosystem for these technology companies to thrive in, and for them to create a very robust ecosystem for collaboration, for innovation. At the end of the day, ultimately to translate into Malaysia leading within these 3 technology clusters for the country. Now, with this new master plan, when we look at it in the next 25 years, the contribution to the country that we look at, Cyberjaya will contribute around 250 billion in GDP, 250 billion ringgit in GDP. Will create around 87,000 jobs in Cyberjaya, as well as 1,200 companies that is looking at to call Cyberjaya its home.
Great. Thank you so much, Ronnie. Now, lastly, you're talking about some of the aspirations with the possibilities as well as potential in Cyberjaya. You also mentioned Cyberjaya's next 25 years planned. But what is the city's aspirations as part of the nation's roadmap?
Yeah, so for us, we are truly developing Cyberjaya into a global technology hub. A global technology hub for Malaysia, not just for Cyberjaya. And like I mentioned just now, this is where the city would thrive in terms of building a very innovative ecosystem for technology companies to look at Cyberjaya, not just to innovate, but to also test and pilot their products. SHAFINAZ mentioned, and this is one key to Cyberjaya, a very unique key to Cyberjaya, is that we have the whole city as a living lab, and not just from an infrastructure perspective, but we have the community here in Cyberjaya. It's a very livable city, and the community really participates whenever we do any introduce new technologies and new services for the company for the community to test and pilot out.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Mr. Ronnie, on sharing on some of the insights as well as opportunities that are available in Cyberjaya and the efforts that's being done at Cyberview. Unfortunately, that is all the time that we have in the studio today. My name is Sonia, signing out of The Nation.